Okay, Tim. So another area where you've been causing controversy recently is the area of time. Okay, so to start us off, I think there's a common perception we all have growing up of the time that there's a past, the future, and the present moment, and then we get into spirituality, and it's pointed out that we never experience the past or the future. We're always living in this present moment, and this is like, oh yeah, that's the case. And you find these expressions in things like in Zen, if not now, when? And it's not meant in a motivational sense of get on with it. It's meant in the sense of when do you experience other than the now? The best-selling spiritual book of our age, probably Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. That was probably where I came across. Was introduced this idea of you only ever experience the present moment. And you yourself, not that long ago, wrote a book called How Long Is Now? A koan, a puzzling question to draw one's mind to that. And there were photos of you at the time smashing clocks with a hammer.
Yes, I think I've finally come back and gone extremely long, it turns out.
So
13.8 billion years.
The ideas you evolved in Soul Story, are they in contradiction to that? Because you've been saying things along the lines of you were recalling that you might have said time doesn't exist in the past, and now you've no idea what that meant. Okay, so where is it a contradiction of that kind of spiritual philosophy from Zen to Eckhart, or is it something that sits alongside that from a different point of view?
Well, it's certainly not a contradiction of the experience. The experience is what we need to explain. What we're looking for is what's the best understanding of the experience, and our experience is multifaceted. And therefore, it's very easy to say things which sound like they're deep, but or express one part of it. So the reason I ended up with the question in my book, How Long Is Now, was about exactly this. And what I developed there with paralogical thinking, which came from that very much, was an understanding of seeing things in opposite ways at once, and the way that is not a contradiction, it actually describes reality. So that what I'm saying now about time is very much in that spirit. So what I pointed to in How Long Is Now is, what makes the now is that there's the coexistence of this flow of ever-changing experience where you can never catch the now because it's too small, because it's just change. It's just a process. So you can always look smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And most of our time we look quite large and we go, we're having this conversation now, and so forth. And so there's that flow of time, of change, and then there's this presence of awareness of conscious being, in our case, witnessing that. And that's what makes it always now, because and it's always there. So one of the issues which has come up on the forum that we may touch on again later, but it might as well deal with it now as it's in my mind, which is people talking about, yes, you say the reality of time is reality, but I feel this experience of timelessness when I wake up. And my feeling is, yes, that's my whole point, is that there's this flow of time, and then there's this presence of timeless being. And when we enter into the deep awake state, we kind of wake up more to both, actually. But often the revelation is, there's this deep place where I experience something which doesn't change, which is not time, which is pure presence. And Zen, of course, is about that. So Zen is about waking up to that. So it's constantly pointing to the thing which is always now. Don't get pulled into the changing experience. See the thing which is always now, which doesn't change because there's nothing to change. It's just pure being. Now, that's great, and I love it. And my work has been a lot about that too. But then there is also still the process of constant change. And my latest work, well, generally, having spent so long looking at how we can wake up to the timeless, then my attention has come back to the process of time. What is that? How can I understand it? And how can I wake up to time? So that for me, the old work is very much has this implicit in it. And I've just developed it much further now, which is, okay, now, what is this time thing?
Okay, so we've had some questions from, particularly from David Webster, on the nature of time. So just to take a brief, starting off, he's looking to go into that question exactly. Really, what are you saying time. What is time, Tim? How are you defining time?
Yes. David, in this excellent few posts actually on the nature of time, talks about, I sent out a mind pop, which I hope loads of people may have seen. If they haven't, they should go and check it because they're great. I love them. Little short things. I did one, and it was called "What is Time?" And he rightfully says you didn't answer that question. And actually, it's the wrong title. I gave it that title, and I hadn't thought it through. Really, I should have called it "Time Accumulates," which was my main point. So I haven't dealt at all with the nature of what is time. What I've done, and I haven't done that really in the book Soul Story either, although I'll have a stab at it now. And I haven't done it because what I'm suggesting is that we treat time as foundational. Now, the problem with anything you make foundational is it's the thing you don't explain. So in spiritual terms, often God is foundational. You don't explain God. Where did God come from? Well, it's the first cause. It's the thing which you go, to use Ludwig Wittgenstein's analogy, at a certain point, you just go, this is the foundation. This is where the digging stops here, and I build from there. Now, for materialists, that is the matter or energy or some physical or objective thing. For idealists or many spiritual people, it's consciousness. But you can't say what that is. You just have to go, well, there it is, that, and it has its nature. What I'm suggesting is that in terms of understanding the cosmos, we should actually take time as foundational, and is absolutely essential to the nature of reality. And I'm doing that for two reasons. Now, you mentioned earlier this commonplace in spirituality and science to say it's an illusion. And I would argue very strongly that we can't make any sense of that statement if you really think about it, because everything we ever experienced is time. And even though we experience the moment, that we make sense of the moment only as a process in time. So that this sentence is only a sentence because you have a sense of the past, or maybe even a sense of where it's going. It's only that it is only it because the sentence exists in time. It doesn't exist in the moment. There is no sentence in the moment. So everything we experience, everything we understand, every thought, everything inherent in that is time.
So is that different to a consciousness-only idealist approach, which might say that time is a property of consciousness? It's something that arises within consciousness.
This issue now doesn't really, it doesn't prejudice the materialist or the idealist version of whether you see it all in matter as matter. In fact, what I'm suggesting is that time arises as both subject and object. We can get into that maybe, but that the time stream, what arises with time or evolving form, you can call it what you like, is the process of subject and object, which will lead eventually to consciousness. So that neither are the foundation. The foundation is potentiality, which is the formless potentiality of being, which you can neither describe as subject or object. It's a non-dual presence before all of that, conceptually before that, is giving rise to the process of time. And the process of time is is therefore foundational to the nature of form. Everything which is in form, which we think of as things, are actually processes. Everything, the cosmos itself, is a process, and a process is made of time. Now, what David is asking is, well, what does that mean? What is it? Now, in one way, I want to go, well, I'm actually suggesting we use it as a foundational concept. Mm-hmm. He jokes about a timeism or a Timism, and in a way, yes, that is what I'm saying. But let me try and say something, because the other thing which is key to the worldview I'm exploring is that the nature of reality is information subjectively perceived, objective information subjectively perceived. So I'm going to leave the subjectively perceived bit because it's a bit of a complication for this issue, and just go, let's treat the universe in this for now as information. So that you've got the arising of the flow of time is the unfolding of information. And therefore what I'm saying is, in a way, that time is the evolving information. And the information and the nature of that time is that the time is the information accumulates. So information which has come into form is now always implicit in the new information which has arisen from it. So that you could say time is accumulating, evolving information, if you liked. That might be another way in which you could at least, I mean, let me just say again, you know, this worldview I'm trying to formulate is just at its beginning. So you push all of it too hard and there'll be a million questions. Of course there will, as I have a million questions. At this stage, what matters to me is to create a general sense of the view that I'm articulating, because it feels really important, in the hope that people can get a sense of it enough that we can start forming it into greater shape. So what I'm saying to David is, look, the universe is made of accumulated time. And accumulated time can be seen as the unfolding of evolving information, so that this moment now is paralogical. It is the meeting of this formless potentiality and evolving time, which is accumulated information. So it includes within it everything that has been and everything that could be. So the moment is always the meeting of everything that has been, the formed, which is formed forever, and the formless, everything that could be, which is potentiality.
Okay, let me give you a couple of examples from science, and you can tell me if they contradict or sit nicely alongside what you're saying there.
I really want you to do that, but I just realized I want to do one more thing first. I know I've been talking for a while.
Okay.
And to take off on another angle, but I also wanted to, because it might be helpful to people, is to see precursors of what I'm saying, because this hasn't just come out of the blue. Everything comes from somewhere, and whilst none of these have been particularly influential for me, like, oh, I took it from here, I know that people have been exploring this idea for a very long time, actually. And so to point to people, to other people who are saying very similar things, you can go right back to the ancient esoteric tradition with the idea of the Akasha, which is the idea of there being a memory to the universe, so that everything that has been is recorded in the Akasha. And what I'm saying there is something very similar. I don't use the word memory, because memory for us is our reconceptualization of the past in the present. It's a story we tell about the past, and so it is notoriously infallible. But what the Akasha is really saying is a perfect memory, which is really to say the existence of the past itself, a record of the past itself, is in the fabric of the nature of the cosmos. So that's exactly what I'm saying. And then another view that I came across, it was when I worked with the Kogi Indians of Colombia, who had this idea of a luna, which was memory and possibility. Now that for sure has had an influence on me, because I'm saying this moment is memory, or the past and the possible. And they were describing the cosmos as that, the memory of everything that had been, the past meeting the possible. And I think that's a key concept from the shamanic tradition. And then if we jump to science, I think a very key thinker in this area is Rupert Sheldrake, who writes about the presence of the past. And I'm sure he's been at least an unconscious influence on me, and one that I haven't gone into, but I mean, I've been reading his work I first came across it when I was a teenager, so or early 20s. So it's been around for a long time. And he is really breaking ground on this idea and trying to say, look, let's see if we can understand that in philosophy, process philosophy. Whitehead is another key figure. Honestly, I find it very difficult to understand, but I'm sure he's saying something similar. And the other person is Irvin Laszlo, who wrote a lovely review of my book, who has been talking about this in physics and systems science, how we can see that the past hasn't gone. It's implicit. It's implicit in the moment.
Okay, so coming to science then. So what one idea, I wonder how this sits alongside, or if there's any conflict with. Science has gone into time with Einstein's theory of relativity.
Yep.
So apparently, if I was to fly at the speed of light to the nearest star and fly back again at the speed of light, when I arrive back, 8 years would have passed for you, because it's about 4 light years away, I think. And no time really would have passed for me. I would perceive that it was a very quick journey, and you would have perceived me taking 8 years to get there and back. So we've got this discrepancy in the timescale. And to jump from that well-established piece of science to something more on the edge, there's a doctor called Darrell Bem who has done research into spelling tests and getting people to take a spelling test, and then later, after the test, revise for it, and then looking at the results they got on the test and finding they got better results, they answered better on the they revised for some of the questions afterwards, and they did better on the questions they revised for after the test, if that word salad makes sense. So indicating that the present can influence the past, essentially. And I think there's other examples in esoteric belief systems about that kind of thing. So does anything of that nature affect the views you have?
I can't comment on the spelling thing because
irrespective of whether it's true or not. Alex Aguirre says it is, and he was on the that's interesting. But irrespective of whether it's true, would it in principle cause a contradiction?
I see what you're saying. What I'm it could cause a contradiction. Does it necessarily cause a contradiction? I'd need to think that through. But what I can say is in relation to the first thing, which is what I'm saying is really, like most of the things that I get involved in, is actually very simple. I'm not talking about the rate of change, which is what that issue of time. I'm not talking about time as a measurement. Oh, how come an hour's gone for me, but 20 years went for you? I'm not talking about that, or the rate of physical change. I've got old, but you haven't. Any of that. That's how we measure the process of change of time, and that is obviously complex. And what Einstein has showed us is that it's not this juggernaut that just goes through like we think. The other great example I can comment on is in physics with the double slit experiment, where it seems that you can retrospectively change how something appears as a wave or a particle by the way you measure it later. Again, that's the way we perceive the past. What I'm saying is something really, really, really simple, that with all of those instances, at any moment, the moment will contain everything that has happened before, and it will be a new possibility that has never been realized. So even in the moment where you're looking back on the particles, it's like that moment has never happened before, but it will include you perceiving setting the experiment up, and so that no one has ever experienced a moment which is not completely new, a new possibility being realized, and includes implicitly within it whatever has happened before. If you went back in time, you would not be going back in time. That's the great thing about the imagination, isn't it? If we went back now to the beginning of this conversation, if we were going back, within the fantasy, it would still include the conversation. That's how we know we'd gone back. So although we would find ourselves in a past situation suddenly, which would be very strange because that doesn't happen, but let's imagine it did, it would still come after this. So fundamental to the nature of everything experience we have is that the past accumulates and gives birth to something new, and it accumulates and gives birth to something new. And so the point I'm trying to make is really that simple. I'm not trying to make grand claims about how we can measure time or how it sits with relativity. I have no idea about all of that. What I do think is, even with that, this will be true. And this seems like a very profound insight about the fundamental nature of what existence is and how we experience it.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Have we covered David's points there? Is there...
Yeah, I think there's a whole another thing which is worth getting into, which he talks about his experience.
Yes.
And where he's going, look, I don't, as a philosopher, he likes to focus on an experiential reality for things, and he doesn't experience time accumulating. It's like he's only experiencing the moment. Now, we've kind of answered that already, but it's such a nice thought. I'd like to give it another few moments, if that's okay, because because I'm like that too. Everything I write as a philosopher comes from an investigation of my actual experience, and that can only be done in the moment. But implicit in the moment is the past. Like I said, implicit in the end of this sentence is the beginning. No thought makes sense without that. So what I would say to David is, actually, I think you do experience the past implicitly within the moment. And he's going, look, if it's implicit there, shouldn't it be there? If the past is accumulating, shouldn't it be there in a more tangible way? Well, obviously, it can't be. And if the word accumulate doesn't work for him, then maybe we find another word. But what I'm suggesting is that the information which has happened in the past is always present in the moment, and if you look at it, you can see that. So that I know that implicit in this moment is us deciding to do it, is us turning on the record, is us learning to speak English, is the evolution of physical bodies, is everything is implicit. Now, I don't see that, but it's implicit if I think about it. I recognize it. What I see is always, and therefore, what the moment is the meeting of all of that past information and all of the possibility. It's always that paralogical meeting which is what I experience. I never experience the past. I always experience where the past meets the possible. That's what I experience. And now I'm still experiencing where the past meets the possible, because I always experience the realization of a new possibility. So I don't experience the past. It's implicit in the moment. I don't actually experience the possible either. In a way, it's implicit in the moment. What I experience is the meeting of the two, which is the realization of an ever new
Okay.
potentiality.
I have another question, actually, because I know David is an idealist.
Yeah.
Philosopher, consciousness, that's the thing. And you seem to indicate before that this is not necessarily in contradiction to idealism or materialism. This is something a bit different. So what I want to ask then is, does this hold true in a dream? Is everything you're saying about time as it plays out in this universe, would you also say that's true if you're dreaming at night, that the past in a dream is meeting with the present moment and the possible?
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely, I would. Absolutely. Now, the difference between the levels of reality which we're experiencing, so if you look at the dream level of reality, where it's literally the dream level, which is soul, and this biological, physical level, where we're bodies, it would be astonishing for us to go back in time and find ourselves at the beginning of the conversation, even though it included everything that had happened in a biological reality, because biological reality doesn't work like that, because everything has independent existence. So literally your room would have to go back in time as well, everything would, and it would be astonishing for that to happen. But on a soul level, at the level of dreams, that happens all the time. It would not be at all astonishing if we were having a dream and we went back in time together and we re-experienced our first meeting. But we would still have implicit in that all of the time which had happened before, everything that, for it to be a meaningful experience, it would still come after the present. So what I'm saying is that the fluidity of the dream, it makes it so it means we can manifest possibility much quicker and much easier in the imagination than in sensation, but always the next moment includes every moment that's been before. Whether we remember it, whether we don't, it always does. That's the fundamental nature of the unfolding of form. Everything which has come into form is formed. We can reapproach it, we can re-understand it, we can reperceive it, we can see it in a whole new way. We can leave it behind us, forget about it, we can ignore it, we can transform it in the present, in our understanding. But it is in a very real sense the foundation from which the new moment arises. It's what the universe is, and it's what we are.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Have we covered all the bases there?
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to just mention was something which isn't on the forum, but which has come up a lot, which is precognition, just because when I've been giving talks, a number of people have mentioned it. I also wanted to mention Lee Smolin. When I talked about Rupert Sheldrake and Irvin Laszlo, I didn't mention Lee Smolin. For those that are interested in this from the point of view of a physicist, is a leading physicist. He's written a very interesting book called The Singular Universe and the Reality of Time, which is a physicist coming against this thing in physics where in physics it's like the argument fundamentally is the equations work either way and therefore time is reversible, which I think for Lee Smolin, but certainly for me, is like, well, that's a failure of, that shows you why mathematics, the limits of mathematics to understand this, it doesn't show that time goes backwards.
Oh, okay.
Or unaccumulates. It just shows you that maths can't account for accumulation, or you need to put that in, because that's the nature, the fact that time doesn't do that. It shows the limitation of the understanding. We should not try and look at maths and then say the universe therefore is like this. We should look at the universe and try and explain it.
So are you coming down on one side of the line and not another with regard to quantum physics and these kind of experiments that show? I'm
saying that that we've got a lot of, when you get down to these, when you look at a lot of things that are happening in relativity and quantum physics, that a lot of odd things are happening in terms of how we experience this flow of time. What we'll never have is a sense that somehow the past unaccumulates, because it's always the next moment when you do the next experiment comes after all of the moments that went before where you did the experiments before. Even if you're reperceiving the past, you're perceiving it in the next moment.
Okay. And with regard to precognition.
So precognition, yeah.
It's probably one of the most well demonstrated aspects of psi in the laboratory.
Yeah.
And in people's experience as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so how would that fit into this? Because I'm saying, we've dealt with the past, which is people going, really? Does the past really accumulate? But I'm also saying it's the past meets the possible. And there's another form of understanding of time, which you get in physics and in spirituality, which I also really don't like, which is determinist, which is, well, in some way, the future's already there. It's like a film. It's all happened already. I hear that all the time. Everything's just happened, and now it's just playing out. Which is a horrendous, life-denying view. This whole conversation's already happened. There's no point in any of it. It's totally uncreative, horrible, ghastly view of reality for me. I can't tell you how much I dislike that view of reality, and how little it fits with my deep intuition about how important this creative process is that we're in, where not only is the new moment forming from everything that's been before, but we get the chance to engage with it through conscious choice and creativity. That it completely undermines that. So if we don't go with that rather life-destroying idea, how could it be that people do seem to have precognition? Nearly always pretty vague, but nevertheless pretty compelling. And I don't want to dismiss it at all. So what I've done in Soul Story, and again, like everything in Soul Story, this is just the beginnings of something, has tried to say, look, with the evolving of soul, with the dimension of the imagination, we see the arriving of concepts and meaning, and very importantly, we see the arriving of narrative. And if anything defines the nature of soul, I think it's story, narrative, which is why each one of us experiences our lives as a story. And that it's possible that we can project stories forward in the same way that we can with physics. So although I don't think there's any reasons to think that this set of keys has already fallen into my hand, I can predict, I have a precognition that when I let go, they're going to fall into my hand. What do you know? They did. So the fact that I can predict something or see that a possibility will unfold does not mean it has already happened. It just means that I can see that it's likely to happen. And another image is you're standing on top of a hill and you can see your journey laid out before you. You can see, it's going to go in that direction, and mostly it will. So that the way that I would see I think there's a whole element of what I call narrativity, the power of the story to govern what happens in life, which we don't understand, but which is a reality, just as in physics there's causal realities. there is a narrative reality to soul, and that what we're experiencing with precognition is where the story is going. Will it definitely go there? No. Is it likely to go there? Probably.
But isn't that what
unfolds?
Isn't that what the science takes out of the equation, the likelihood? For example, the experiments done around precognition, you will have like 4 pictures, and one of them is a bunny rabbit, and another is a sunset and a flower, and then a car crash, and they are randomly shown. So there's no way of predicting whether it's going to be the nice or the negative image. There's a 25% chance of it being the negative image, and the body's physiology sometimes reacts prior to the negative image being shown, sometimes, but enough to be statistically significant over a large number of trials. So I can see how you can predict the keys will fall into your hands. I can see how you might have a sense of a more complex plot emerging than that. But does it also apply to when things seem to be truly random?
Yeah, I think so, because, I mean, and again, I don't want to make excuses for myself here, but I am really just presenting a very a powerful but vague concept around narrative, which I think can be developed to account for all psi phenomena, or something like it. So what I'm saying is that, you know, that you can see that the knowing, or the it's going to be the car crash, or your physicality even knowing that it's going to be the car crash in your example, is akin to what we also experience as synchronicity, which is this kind of the sense in which there is a narrative interaction between the realm of soul and its ability to influence downwards, if you like, what's going to happen, what is being set up, and the biological and causal influence upwards, which seems like that would be impossible. So that somewhere within an understanding of how magic can happen generally, which is the arising of synchronous, meaningful events, which are not causally, which are, to use Carl Jung's phrase, they're acausal, that there's an acausal connecting principle, which he called synchronicity, I'm calling it narrativity, to bring out the idea that it's about story. But that also, within your example, there is a story happening. And the story that's happening is we're doing psi experiments. And that's part of, we're going to find out. And that is, and that story is influencing what everyone's experiencing. And that we need to stop seeing story as an illusory add-on. Oh, we tell a story about life. Life's life, but we tell a story about it, and say, no, it's deeper than that. Actually, story itself, even though we can misunderstand story, of course, we tell stories about stories, but that it is an emergent level of reality in which, and it's the one we mostly experience as human beings, which is soul story. That's where we spend most of our time. So I think within that, there is a way in which we can see that we project into the future all the time. And I think, and in the book, I've gone even further and suggested, again, using this idea of narrativity, that it may even be that can be why there's intentionality, why we can intend something to happen and then it magically does. Like I manifested a recording studio, I've written about that, you know, crazy stuff, which seems impossible, but which happened, as many people have found. But also maybe that intentionality can go way back, as some people suggest, before birth. And that there is a deep soul intentionality, which is why when I met my wife, Debbie, with her 18-month-old son, Bo, I was overwhelmed by a sudden certainty that I would be this child's father and that we'd have a daughter together. And I didn't know it was a daughter, actually, it was just a child together. And you know, and we have that, don't we? You know, there's that sort of sense of this, and we say this is meant to be. There's a sense of, oh, this is significant moment in the story. And without it having to be like some puppet where we're just going through like puppets, where there's a way of melding together the inherent freedom in the expression of every new moment that we have, and a sense in which the story is not random. The story is impregnated with meaning, and that means that what's coming up, there's a conversation going on, between us and the story. It's not one or the other.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim.
Did that make any sense?
Yeah,
you have to tell me honestly.
I think it did. I think we'll put it up and evolve another conversation on time in the future. So, yeah, thank you for that one. And
you know, actually, Richard, I'm just thinking I was going to suggest we did another little video on another question we've been asked by Loris about stories, and it just felt we've got into story.
I haven't read the question.
Let's add this one to his question as well, and refer people who are interested in that. And we'll do time and you know,
time and story. Do you have the question there?
Yes, I do.
I probably have it actually.
Yeah, let me read it out. I pulled it out as well. This is from Loris Ullups, I think it might be pronounced. I don't know. Amazing name. Yeah. Speaking as someone called Freke, you know, I sympathise. You've said that people are stories. That's what our ever-changing identity is. Some teachers, however, have warned us not to identify with our story. If our sense of identity isn't our story, what is it? So the reason I wanted to deal with that now is because I've already made the point, which is, look, I see that level of story, of narrative, as an emergent reality, so that I really am meeting the story of Richard. Now, Richard may or may not understand his own story. Well, he will do both. He will both understand it and not understand it, like Tim both understand. And there'll be constantly revelations to me about my story, which happen all the time. But there is a sequence of experiences which has made up my life, and I am that sequence of experiences, and therefore I am that narrative. And then I can tell us a conceptual story about that narrative, and that will be how I understand it today, and that may change tomorrow. The point that is being made by the spiritual teachers that he's mentioning is, if we're just stuck in the story, we do not become conscious of the formless presence of the timeless. So that what's happening with all of these questions, I think, is fundamentally the same thing. I am adopting a paralogical understanding which says both at once, not the story or the you know, which is time, or the presence, which is the timeless moment. Both. To wake up to the presence of spirit is to step out of the story with one's attention and be conscious that there is this empty, formless presence, which is our deepest identity. It's where we're all one. It's our deepest being.
Yeah, there's nothing in Loris's question. There's nothing that specifically calls upon soul story. There is there. Like, would you have answered that question the same way 5 years ago from a mystery experience, deep awake perspective? That it's looking at the dual nature of our identity as on this witnessing presence, this deep self, and also the character, the story in the play of life.
Yes, I think I would have. And the difference now is that I'm wanting to go. I want to give a metaphysical backup to the nature of story, and that it really is an emergent reality. It's not. You know, it should be taken. It needs to be really respected, so that our deepest. So it allows me to answer the question perhaps in a deeper way when he says, "What is our identity?" If it isn't our story, well, I'm saying it is our story. I'm saying there is a formless presence of being which is beyond time, which is our shared identity. And the deep wake state, we wake up to that, but it's expressing itself as the process of time and the formation of this flow of form. And at the level we are experiencing at, it's reached the level where it's that flow is soul. And we're experiencing it right now as this flow of soul. And at that level, it emerges as story. It goes beyond matter and life, and it emerges as story. So we are the process of unfolding realization, arisen at the level of soul, where we experience it as narrative. And that, therefore, our universal identity is the emptiness of being, spirit, and our individual identity is this arising of soul stream, which is the story of Tim meeting the story of Richard. Everything you've ever been meeting everything I've ever been, which is what I mean when I talk about our stories or our narratives.
Yeah, and that's a contrast, I think, that's come up when you've spoken with other non-dualist philosophers, like in dialogues you've done where they've really tried to reject the notion of story.
Yeah. And that's why he's saying teachers say reject story. So Eckhart Tolle and loads of them are all like, oh, you're stuck in your story, get out of your story. My thing is, you're stuck in your story, don't be stuck in it. Come out and have this deep presence as well, and then come back to your story because it's beautiful, and impact it creatively to realize deeper and more emergent levels of your soul and engage with them.
I think I've heard you use the analogy of being at the cinema, right? And if you went with someone who just kept saying that it's always a film and they'd seen that actor in something else, it'd be kind of annoying, right? But then you do get people who struggle to tell the difference between what's on TV and reality. Okay. And yeah, for them, they have to be told that no, these are actors, right? Or the little children, right? They don't understand that it's that's not really going on. So it's scary then, it's too much then.
Yes.
So then you have to like have a bit of non-duality, to say, okay, no, it's just actors and that's a set. It's not really a monster.
Yes. So, if you're, and also to get, this is, I did struggle with the terminology, and I still do. I haven't worked it quite out yet, how to say it clearly. That's the honest truth. I'll get there, but I'm not there yet. Because the problem is, I'm wanting to say we're a story or we're a narrative, but we tell stories about that story. So although I am everything I've ever been, that's what I am, and that is a narrative, I now tell a story about that. And that story can be completely wrong and totally confused and coming from all sorts of unconscious prejudices and all the rest of it. And you may want to say to me, Tim, you're stuck in a story about your story. Don't do that. And that would be absolutely true. And when the spiritual teachers are saying that, it's really valuable. But don't let that dismiss the depth understanding that you are nevertheless still this unfolding narrative which you're trying to understand. So maybe we need to use two different words to mean the different things. I haven't worked that out yet, but hopefully the meaning is, people can hear the meaning that I'm trying to get across, even if I haven't quite got the terminology to say it clearly. And then the other thing I wanted to add to that finally was that all of this is coming, and this is a big thought actually to end with, but it seems to me that all of the things which I'm arguing against, all the pre-paralogical understandings of spirituality are trying to get us back to something. And the evolutionary perspective is trying to take us forward to something, so that something greater, rather than going back to something greater. So that what happens, I think, is that without that understanding, people come in and they go, we're all stuck in this story. We need to get back to the simple being, which was there all along. But actually what's happening with that is that you're returning to, if you do it in that way, you're trying to return to pre-individuality. Individuality is the problem. We should get back before it. We should be like we were when we were little children. You hear it said all the time. So we've fallen into this thing. It's developed in a certain way. We need to get back to how it was before. What I'm saying is, no, we don't want pre-individuality. We want trans-individuality. We want to go forward. Having come into this process, we can now be conscious of this greater thing, which is not, it is before the story, but we're experiencing it through the story. And therefore it transcends and includes the story. It is much more than just the ground of potentiality from which it's all come. It is realizing a greater potentiality through the arising of soul and story. And that's the story we need to live out. That's the story we can engage with, and why our lives really matter, because that's how we can take the whole evolution of ourselves and the cosmos forward.
Okay, that is a big thought to finish on, and obviously one that will generate other thoughts in the future, but we will finish there. So thank you very much, Tim, and thank you everyone for watching, listening, and yeah, please do comment if you feel this is a sufficient answer to the problems and questions around time and story, or if you don't, where we need to address in the future. So Tim,
and maybe it's worth saying to people who are watching this, if you've made it this far and you don't know, you're thinking, what's this really all about, is that you can find out about my new book Soul Story, which is what we're exploring here. There's loads of videos on my website about it, which are all free. You can buy a copy of the book, which is pretty damn cheap, and that's all available to you. And you can find out more. And then if you want to see the comments and get involved, join my forum.
Yeah, we'll put links to it below.
On the forum, then come to that, and you can engage.
There will be links below on whatever media platform you're on with this. Okay, Tim, thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Richard.